The glossopharyngeal nerve is a mixed nerve. It contains 5 types of fibers: motor fibers that innervate the stylopharyngeus muscle, visceral sensory fibers to the carotid body, somatic sensory fibers to various locations, special sensory fibers for taste to a portion of the tongue, and parasympathetic fibers to the parotid gland. The glossopharyngeal nerve exits the skull through the jugular foramen. At this foramen are the superior and inferior ganglia containing the cell bodies for the sensory components of this nerve. Cranial nerve 9 courses inferiorly, following the stylopharyngeus muscle and supplying it with somatic motor fibers. Glossopharyngeal nerve contains visceral sensory fibers to the carotid body, a chemoreceptor structure located at the carotid bifurcation. Cranial nerve 9 passes between the superior and middle constrictor muscles of the pharynx toward the oropharyngeal area. Here, glossopharyngeal nerve contains somatic sensory fibers to the mucosa of the oral pharynx, the oral surface of the soft palate, and the palatine tonsil. These somatic sensory fibers serve as a pathway for the gag reflex. Cranial nerve 9 also contains sensory fibers to the tongue. These form the lingual branch of glossopharyngeal. The lingual branch includes special sensory fibers for taste to the posterior third of the tongue, and somatic sensory fibers to the mucosa of the posterior third of the tongue. Lastly, cranial nerve 9 contains preganglionic parasympathetic fibers. These fibers synapse in the otic ganglion. The postsynaptic fibers reach the parotid gland and provide it with motor innervation. The course of this pathway is complex, and it's summarized here as follows. As cranial nerve 9 emerges from the jugular foramen, it gives off a branch called the tympanic nerve. The tympanic nerve contains 2 types of fibers: preganglionic parasympathetic fibers and somatic sensory fibers. The tympanic nerve enters the middle ear cavity in the petrous part of the temporal bone. The space that is the middle ear cavity is shown in green here. The sensory fibers of the tympanic nerve innervate the mucosa of the middle ear cavity. The rest of the tympanic nerve forms the tympanic plexus inside the middle ear cavity. A nerve arises from the tympanic plexus. This nerve is the lesser Petrosal nerve. The lesser Petrosal nerve exits the middle ear cavity and enters the middle cranial fossa. Then it exits the skull through the foramen ovale. The parasympathetic fibers of 9 synapse in the otic ganglion, located just inferior to the foramen ovale. The postsynaptic parasympathetic fibers join the auriculotemporal nerve to course to the parotid gland. Remember that the auriculotemporal nerve is a branch of cranial nerve V3. The postsynaptic parasympathetic fibers from the otic ganglion provide the parotid gland with visceral motor innervation.